this experiment was a very, very challenging to run. I just want to begin by saying that running an experiment in a setting such as Rio with police commanders that change every 2 years is very, very challenging. So you have a commitment with one police commander, and then the new commander comes and the commitment falls, and you have to rearrange the whole team so that they really supported this. We had a strong support from a commander, then it was a change. We had the CEO of Taser going to Brazil, and in that meeting, the whole thing fell apart. So we had to reconstruct it, and finally we were able to start. Another thing that happened is that the place where the commanders chose, Rocinha, which is the largest favela in Rio, it was not prepared to receive the cameras and the docking station. So we had to invest in bringing enough electricity, Wi-Fi, and so on. So it was really challenging in many, many respects. And also the situation became at the middle of the study incredibly difficult for police officers to patrol the streets. So at the end, basically, we were in a stalemate in which police and drug traffickers were at the verge of war. So that's just an introduction. My co-authors, Vanessa Melo, she's now studying a PhD in anthropology. Gustavo left for Facebook. They were very critical in the initial stages of the project. Vanessa, especially in helping me with all the fieldwork, which I did entirely with her. But by the time of revising the document and creating the regressions, I must say that most of the work here is done by me, but they deserve full credit because how much they support the initial stages. So I just want to say that police violence is a very complex phenomenon that results from a combination of individual, societal, and institutional factors. There is a lot of debate in the US that focuses on structural racism and implicit racial biases. There is another line of research that also focuses on societal preferences for police violence, especially in places where people fear criminal groups, and there is strong support for police vigilantism. But the focus of this paper is on institutional factors, including the ways in which police departments monitor and sanction abuse. In a now classic study, Brehm and Gates say that police misconduct is related to agency problems stemming from an incapacity to supervise frontline officers. So we build from that, and we see that one of the most prominent interventions in recent years seeking to address these agency problems has been body-worn cameras. So that was the reason we wanted to bring this to Brazil. I got the support. I went first to Rialto, where they had run one of the experiments on body cameras. This was early, I think, in 2014 or something. And then from there, I didn't have the money to do it. I got the support from the CEO of Taser. They lent me 100 cameras, but then I had to obviously import them to Brazil, and all the study is not paid by Taser. So I want to emphasize that they only provided the cameras, but the rest was paid by a grant that I got from Stanford Business School. So just quickly, it's believed that body cameras can curb police violence through two main mechanisms. First, body cameras are likely to increase supervisors' monitoring capacity, which presumably increases, their capacity to sanction officers who refuse to comply with protocols. And second, due to their ability to produce high quality and more reliable evidence, body cameras could increase the probability that police are prosecuted and convicted in courts. And it's important to say that this deterrence channel may operate both ways, restraining police officers' abusive behavior, but also reducing aggressive behavior toward the police in their interactions with civilians. And we find both of these results, more or less, as you will see. It's a complicated results that I will present So I just go quickly here. Most available information on body cameras has been conducted in the US. There are studies that are very optimistic. Some of them are underpowered, but they find reductions in police use of force. Others are significantly less optimistic, saying that there are a lot of problems with managing and recording the images, which we found in Rio. And also that police often don't accept the cameras, which we also find in Rio. And there is a very important study that I think warned us that cameras alone are not really capable of producing changes unless the entire police department and the police supervisors, the commanders, really accept them and set standards that they have to be measured against the images, so that, for example, if you want to increase procedural justice, departments explicitly need to incorporate measurements and monitoring behaviors associated with procedural justice through the images. And this is something that is essential. It's not only just put in the camera and then that's it. You have to incorporate within your procedures and sanctions and the camera. So just to give you a very quick context of Rio, Rio's military police is one of the most violent in the world. Police have killed more than almost 20,000 people between 2003 and 2019. This is only in Rio. If you think of the entire country, it would be, some say that it would be, some calculations point that it would be equivalent to having 60,000 people killed a year by police officers in the US, where we normally observe like around 100,000 on average people, 100 people, 1,000 people killed, excuse me, in the US by police. So this is an extremely violent setting. The violence obviously stems not only because police are violent, but there are also very heavily armed criminal groups in Rio's favelas and also militias that control the favela. So in 2008, the police began a significant transformation of policing approach in Rio's favelas. They decided to move from a militarized policing approach to a community-oriented policing approach through the pacifying police units. I have written a paper extensively analyzing the effects of this, but I just want to mention that in Rocinha, where we ran the experiment, we had a pacifying police unit, which is equivalent to a community-oriented police, but the situation in Rio was such that the community-oriented police had machine guns and they were really extremely armed. So we show in another paper that the community-oriented policing approach reduced police killings by around 45%. We leveraged the staggered implementation of the UPP in around 150 favelas, and we are able to show this through a difference in difference design. But we also show that the UPP had very different heterogeneous effects depending on the ex-ante criminal regime. So particularly in Rocinha, where we run the study, the UPP had very bad consequences. Rocinha is a very large favela of 120,000 inhabitants. And as soon as the UPP was introduced in 2012, they put a commander from BOPI, which is a specialized battalion that is like a SWAT battalion, in charge of the favela. And soon after that, the Amarillo scandal erupted, which was the torturing and killing of a resident that dramatically reduced the legitimacy of the UPP. And the UPP really lost control of the favela. So a lot of our interviews said, before the UPP, things were very peaceful. The criminals were able to maintain order. Then the police comes and now bullets are flying everywhere. So that's the setting where we conducted the study. We assigned over 100 cameras randomly on a daily basis to police officers for 10 months. So I'm going to just give you quickly something about, we conducted a community survey. Unfortunately, we didn't have money to conduct more than the baseline. But I just want to say here on the left, you say all the things that people report police have done. So for example, Invaded home, 12% report that. Killed a friend, 15%. I had to pay a bribe for the police, 20%. So in general, the police are seen more dangerous than the criminals. 61 reported fear of being killed by the police. Only 20% agree that police are less violent than criminals, and only 10% would resort to the police if they were victims of crime. During the study, we were able to collect 3 rounds of surveys to police officers. That was obviously less expensive, so we could do that. And here I show you in the dark blue, the baseline, in gray, the second survey, and in the light blue, the third survey. And we observed a significant decrease as they report to us of every patrolling activity, seizing drugs, seizing guns, arrest, disturbance, domestic violence, resistance to arrest, homicide, robbery. Everything seems to be reducing during the time of our study. Also, their own self-reported use of force. So if they were in an armed conflict, they fire a gun. So everything we observe a significant decline. And importantly, we also observe a significant decline as they report to us of this very toxic relationship in which residents curse police officers. They throw water to them. So for example, in the baseline, 75% of officers say they throw water, 68, they throw urine to us, 83% they throw stones, verbal threats, physical attacks. So there is a really toxic relationship. And during the study, we observed this decline. Obviously, there is no proof that the cameras play some role. And I'm going to now go into quickly the results of the field experiment. This is a UPP in Rocinha. So it's really made of metal. It's very basic. The police are really sort of abandoned up there. There is very little state presence. And the building is really full of holes, of gun holes. It's a very vulnerable situation for them as well. So we assign here almost 10,000 camera shifts to 470 police officers in the study from December 2015 to November 2016. We randomly assign units into treatment and control group, but in addition, to be able to make comparisons within units, we randomly assign units to treatment and control groups at different stages of the study. So that means that we can compare one unit when they were using cameras to the same unit when they were not using cameras. And we also randomize camera assignment by shift. And I'll talk more about this. We were very worried about whether they would comply with the protocol. So let me talk about this later. So we focus on 3 types of officers: the GTPPs, which are tactical units that often engage in armed confrontations. They are deployed to fix they are not deployed to fix geographic areas. Then GPPs are like the proximity policing units that they are deployed to specific units. And then we also, at the middle of the study, at the request of the commander, we assign cameras to supervisors. And you will see that this has a really strong effect on police behavior. So we focus on these 2 units. Then at the very, very end of the study, the commander also said, also put some cameras to what they call radio patrullas, which are really police officers in cars, but we are not going to take them into account because they were very little. So as I mentioned, a main challenge we always thought is going to be to make officers use the cameras. So to do that, we vary 2 things. One is the protocol. So we said to some officers, and that was also randomly assigned, you have to have the camera always on. You cannot put it on and off as they do here in the US, which is what we call the interactive mode, in which when you interact with citizens, that's when you have to turn on the camera. If you are not interacting, you don't turn it on. So we had these 2 protocols assigned randomly. And also we were interested in knowing how many officers need to have a camera in a shift to observe change of behavior. So we randomly assigned some units a full team, so all the officers had the camera, and in other units, only the half team have the camera. But this design was really, I think, well thought of, but then obviously conducting this study in Rio in that setting was very, very difficult. So during the study, we had to make changes to the design. First, we had to drop this half team mode because it was really messy the way they first gave us the monthly assignment of officers, and then we randomly assigned by day which got half and which got full. But then we realized that they were changing officers, on a daily basis. So to be able to randomize, we have to daily receive the names of the officers who were going to work and the following day, and give daily the randomization. And that includes compliance with camera assignment to 90%. So we really had to drop this half team. And then the second change is that the commander unfortunately changed. So they moved a lot of the affected 5 of the 10 original GPP units, which merged into 3 new units that were assigned to the control group. So we had to also move that. And the third challenge was abandoning the always on mode, because police officers completely resisted this. They were incredibly mad about that mode. So we had to switch to interactive mode. I will show results, of even if with little data of all this. So in the end, this is our treatment and control group. I was trying to add a figure that is in the appendix of the paper that clarifies how we're varying this by, by sort of different dates. So even if you're in the treatment group here, then during the following months, you at some point would be in the control group. So we are working with only the 3 first units. As I say, Radio Patrulla, we abandoned it because it was only at the last stage of the study that we had them. So we have 2 dependent variables. The first one is what we call BOPMs, which is any interaction or activity that the police does that is registered. So for example, there are calls to the operations center, and then we here have how many calls the GPP base, GPP Vigilantes, all the units have, for a total of 354. Then there are requests that police officers receive in the street and that they have to respond. They are what they call abordages, and this is like a stop and search. Encounters is very similar to a stop and search. Then also stopping a suspicious person, which again is very similar to stop and search, or when someone is disturbing the peace. So drug trafficking activities, crime against women, transport to the hospital, alarm trigger. So we assess the effect of camera assignment on the probability that any police officer in a shift are involved in a VPO, in any activity, right? And these are reported at the unit shift level, not at the individual level. So this is going to be our unit of analysis. And this is a very important part of what happened in the study. 70% of shifts that register a VPO did not record it. So police really refuse to record, and I'll talk more about that. That's a very, very big limitation of cameras in these settings. So, and our analysis in this section will focus on intention to treat effects. So we consider a shift treated when 1 or more police officers had a camera on, regardless of whether they turned them on or not. I will also show to you the difference when they turn them on. Okay, but most of the time they are not turning them on. So as I say, we consider, we're going to divide BOPMs the following way: total BOPMs, BOPMs that are related to requests. So police are stopping the street by people and they request them, then calls to the operations center, and stop and searches, which are all these abordages, encounters, interactions with suspicious individuals, events where suspects initiate the aggression, and events that are said to disrupt the peace. For the analysis, we group these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in what we call stops and other interactions. So here are the results. We jump to the simulation of the results, which is the following. We observe that when police are given a camera, we observe a significant decrease of any policing activities. Total BPOMs, stops and other interactions, even calls to the operations center. They call to the operations center, and the operations center is supposed to send police officers to respond to that call. And if those officers have cameras, they don't respond to the calls and requests in the street. So we observe a very significant decrease in policing activity in general. So you could think that, you know, maybe stop and other interactions, as residents report that they are super aggressive, they stop and freeze them, they slap them on the face, they pull them by the hair. It's a very toxic way of, you know, interacting with residents. You could think that cameras produce a positive result in inducing police to stop doing this type of stop and searches, but there is other police activity that is necessary that they simply refuse to perform. And the commander of the unit, when we started the experiment, told us, you know, if you put off cameras to our officers, they would stop doing their jobs. This was exactly what she told us, and this is what happened. So you really would wonder what they think their jobs are, that they cannot record what they do. So in that sense, we're not that optimistic, because they're obviously are recording what they think can be recorded, but, you know, possibly interactions that are really nasty, they are not recording, and it is very hard to then sanction them for that purpose. So I'm going to go here quickly. I'm sorry about this blue thing. Yesterday I was putting the presentation and I had to copy this table. So here is all the different forms of treatment. And I just want to say that in general, it points out that, you know, it's better to assign cameras to the full team. It's better to give cameras to the, let me go to the, sorry, because I don't have too much time. Sorry, I clicked the opposite. Okay, so here I want to show you the difference between when officers record the interaction and do not record it. So what you can see is that when they record the interaction, the difference with the control group almost disappears. So it's interesting. When they record the interaction, probably they think that their interaction is okay to be recorded. They are not recorded interactions that probably are abusive. So again, this tells us that without resolving the problem of compliance, we are not going to solve the issue of police abuse. And here is what I was going to say. We were trying to test the different modes. And in general, we observe, as I said, that when you assign to full teams, you observe less BOPMs than when you assign to half teams. The always on mode observes more interactions with civilians. They do more of their jobs. And then the important aspect here is when we assign cameras to supervisors. The figure on the left-hand side shows that when supervisors, these were randomly assigned again. So one day supervisors have cameras, the other day not. So we can measure the effect of having supervisors with camera. And this is really very strong effect. The figure on the left-hand side shows that when supervisors wore a camera, the probability of an interaction or a BOPM increases significantly from 0.02 to 0.06. And the figure on the right shows that regardless of whether officers had cameras or not, assigning cameras to supervisors significantly increased the probability of a BOPM. And this was an intuition of the commander, and he was completely right. Then I'm going to go to the second dependent variable very quickly. These are gunshots. So we have daily gunshots by police officers. not only in this favela, but in the entire, universe of battalions and UPP. So we are doing another paper on this data. But here I just want to point that the start of the study, which are these really the dotted red lines, we observe a significant decline in gunshots, but that decline begins much before our study. So you could say that since February 15, more or less, or if you observe a decline in gunshots. So this in itself doesn't say anything about whether cameras dissuaded use of deadly force. Here, I'm just showing you a crosstab because we don't have enough power to run statistics that in general point to one conclusion, that when they are assigned to cameras, they shoot less. So for example, GPPs in the control group have 162 bullets. And when they are assigned a camera, they don't throw any bullet. The JTPPs, which are more monitored by the commander, directly sent by the commander to special operations, we observe that they still shoot quite a bit with assigned cameras, but they do so less than when they are without cameras. And radio patrullas here, we don't really talk much about them, but we observe the same thing, no gunshots when they are assigned a camera. But we don't dare to say that cameras really reduce use of force. It just points out that it does. And this is another way of showing that. So we compare Rocinha to other UPPs. Rocinha is the red dot, and we observe that during the time of the study, which is between the red two lines, there is a significant decrease in police killings. And in the rest of the favelas, there is a systematic increase. And here on the right-hand side, we observe other favelas, because there are many other favelas that don't have UPPs, but this community-oriented police. And so we also observe a decline in police killings in Rocinha, whereas in the rest, it is increasing. This is only suggestive evidence. As I say, this is not hard evidence. So, but given that police reduce their activity so much when wearing a camera, it would not be surprising that if we had more data, we would obtain a significant results for gunshots. So the main question was, why would police refuse to use cameras? So we begin here with percentage of assigned cameras. 40% at the beginning are using them. Then you can see it drops to almost 10%. And then we had to do something, right, about this. So the dashed line, we move the footage management directly, because it was in the center, so in the general command of operations of the UPP, then we move it directly to the battalion. So when police officers receive the cameras and their guns and their bullets, they see that there is this unit of 6 officers that we train to, to administer the images. And that seems to increase a little bit the usage. Then in May, we convinced the General Command of Operation that they have to publish in the official diary that any occurrence or BOPM must be recorded. And if they don't record it, they can be sent to an administrative sanction. It increases a little bit, but local commanders refuse to enforce it. And then we observe a general decline until August. And in August, interestingly, we start to distribute every day as we distribute their guns, we distribute the cameras. We also distribute a paper in which we say, this is the amount of usage you are doing. So they start feeling very observed and they increase their usage a little bit. But in general, since the supervisors didn't sanction the usage, the lack of usage of cameras, we really have officers that don't use the cameras. So we were able to merge the survey with the bullets. It was a very hard exercise to do, as people who have done this. We were able to merge around half of our officers. The survey then is now merged to actual camera usage. We have more or less a balanced sample in terms of observables of the officers that we missed to merge because there was no way that we could find out who they were because the surveys were anonymous. So we merged them with information such as age, in which battalions they had been before, and so on. And then we run this regression in which, again, I'm sorry about this blue thing, in which we try to say in terms of minutes of recorded that they recorded per the time that they were assigned a camera, and we observe very interesting results. So we have this index of community aggression that has you saw the answers of community aggression before. Our index has a Kern batch of alpha of 0.88. So I think it's reasonable to run this as an index. We also have an armed confrontation index. We also have a dummy of whether they indicate that they are supervised to use the camera or nobody supervises. Also a dummy if the officer had been wounded in the past, and a dummy if they had wounded someone in the past. We didn't ask if you have killed someone in the past because they tend not to answer that sincerely. And interestingly, what we observe is that when they feel the community is more aggressive towards them, they turn on the camera more. We also observe, interestingly, that when they are engaged in armed confrontations, they turn the camera more. When they are supervised, they turn the camera more. And interestingly, when the officer reports having wounded persons in the past, he or she turns the camera less. So we observe a really interesting but also disturbing pattern in which the officers are turning the camera when they think that the community is aggressive towards them and they can use that footage in their defense. Obviously, when they are supervised, and problematically when they have wounded persons in the past, maybe when they take to misbehave, they don't turn the cameras. We have a really long set of interviews trying to figure out, what is the organizational culture that is supporting this. I'm not going to go into it because it's going to be too long, but but we receive answers going from it's impossible in a context such as Rio to have cameras. Everybody here behaves in rough manners. Everybody knows it. The commanders knows it. It's absurd that they are telling us now to record. We don't know what they are going to be using our footage for. So they are very, very afraid of that. But we also observe a really sort of disturbing killing consensus, similar to the one that Dennis Willis found among not the military but the civil police in Sao Paulo. So for example, I just want to read this comment. An officer made this comment. He said, "Good for nothings, vagabundos are all the same. It does not matter if they are 8 or 10 years old. If I can do it, shoot to kill, I will. The laws are not on our side. You arrest a criminal today and tomorrow he's back on the street." And adding to this comment, another officer told us, "The judicial system is what needs to be changed. Once I arrested the same guy twice in 1 week." Another police officer added, "This is why it is often better to kill than to arrest." And we observe that a lot. It's like better kill to arrest is something that is very disturbing. They say this is unfeasible to use. And this is something I want to read because it's just very revealing. So this officer says, "When officers kill a civilian, the sergeant comes after us, then the commander. We must go to the police station where the police chief interrogates you. Then you go to the central headquarters of the UPP. Once this is all done, you have already lost one of your days off." So this last comment, I think, is very telling about the level of numbness to killing some officers have achieved. Here he talks about the stress involved in having to go through all the administrative steps when you kill someone, but not about the actual stress that taking a life must cause. So as I mentioned, I think we uncover an unsettling killing consensus similar to the setup uncovered by Willis, but here what is paradoxical is that it's in the pacifying police unit of Rocinha, which is supposed to be a community-oriented police. So in terms of the conclusion, as I say, despite 30% of the police civilian interactions were recorded. So that means 70% we don't know anything of what happened in that. There seem to be some positive results in that for sure activities such as being frisked, abused, and treated with disrespect must have reduced. And so maybe that's why at the end, the community is reporting less aggression toward the police, right? And it's really intriguing that the cameras induce this change of behavior, despite the fact that they seldom were turned on. So what I understand is that the protocol obliged officers to record every interaction with civilians. And so they decided instead of interact and risk a bad recording that would incriminate them, they decided not to interact and not to record. So the commander was right. They would stop doing their jobs, whatever they believe their jobs to be, and their jobs seem to be also to behave in rough manners. So I think in this case, the general disobedience with the camera protocols, I mean, when this happens, I believe body cameras would hardly work to restrain police misconduct, simply because if police-civilian interactions are not recorded, officers have no reason to be afraid of being punished for their abusive behavior. So a big limitation of the cameras is that they give too much freedom to police officers to activate them. To work in a context like Rio, I think cameras would need to be activated from the main station, withdrawing this decision from frontline officers. The technology already exists, so that would be very interesting to test. But remember that supervisors here also sabotage the study. So in addition to that, you would need supervisors that really want to supervise the officers using the cameras and changing behavior, right? So in general, I can tell that our study on body cameras reflects the very messiness of policy implementations and difficulty of police reform in these settings. The conclusion, as you would see, is very mixed. I mean, in some ways, there seem to be some positive results, but this is almost, in a way, accidental, because you also observe very, potentially very negative results in which police simply refuse to do anything for fear of being recorded. So thank you so much for listening, and I am really eager to hear your comments.
I'd like to congratulate Beatriz Magaloni and her colleagues for the research effort. And considering the research presented in the paper and what is important for policymakers to know, in my presentation, I will comment these topics. Concerning to external validity, I need to talk about concerning to internal validity, I just want to congratulate you for the robust methodology that you use in randomized the control trial. And besides, research overcame a major challenge to employ intent to treat. And regarding external validity, I need to talk about Rio de Janeiro. In summary, Rio de Janeiro can be divided into Morro, hillside, as you see in the picture, where research was developed, and Asfalto, city below, as below. The hills have been irregularly occupied since the beginning of 20th century, and infrastructure is absent to this day. The lack of infrastructure associated with geographic position attracted criminal groups that occupy the hills. These multiple criminal groups are in constant conflict among them and against police. They often use weapons of wars, and for this reason, it's possible to hear shootings anywhere at any time in the city. However, some places are more violent than others. As a result, Rio de Janeiro is one of the most violent urban environments in the country. In addition, there is a problematic police. Where there are good people, however, is the poorest police structure that I have ever seen. There is an organizational emptiness in terms of supervision, training, and protocols. Many unsuccessful policies in the past have generated the past dependency, increasing challenges for police reform. Street-level officers perform their job with almost nothing guidance from high level. A fundamental premise of public policy sustains that less institutionalized the parameters, the more mistakes on the street. Paper mentioned the studies about Brazil. However, Rocinha is a violent rio, and it's different from other rios and from asphalt. And Brazil is not like Rio de Janeiro. What happens in Rio de Janeiro does not happen in anywhere else in the country. In general, a bodywork and policy is implemented in top-down direction. High-level officers define all elements of the policy. It means the policy is institutional. Middle-level officers manage the implementation, and implementation is up to street-level officers. Concerning street-level bureaucracy, Michael Lipsky teaches that lower levels workers often do not share the perspectives and preferences of their superior. These workers may not consider orders from above legitimate, and a distinct degree of non-compliance can be expected. Therefore, bottom-up direction should be considered as part of policy implementation. In this specific case, the bodywork and policy had not yet been implemented in Rio de Janeiro. Testing the use of the equipment was carried out for the first time with this research. We can say the innovation came from out to inside direction. Researchers had to negotiate with the high level and push hard the low level. And points to highlight. Research was not an institutionalized bodywork and policy, and street-level officers did not legitimate the innovation. Why didn't officers follow cameras protocol? That behavior happened in other countries. I found the studies that argue that some officers may be reticent to adopt technology for fear. Fear that it will be used as a new punishment tool. In addition, some police agencies outside Brazil have vehemently denied the benefits of cameras. This reticence is particularly important. Research suggests that the effectiveness of body-worn cams is directly related to the degree to which the officers adhere to protocol. How to deal with this problem? First step is consider what I said in the slide before about legitimacy. Therefore, it's not reasonable to punish non-compliance. If agencies adopt punishment as treatment for non-compliance, the true effectiveness of body-worn cams will never be realized. Measuring police performance is not an easy task, even outside Brazil. However, the OPM is not the best variable to measure police-citizen interaction because its use is restricted to crime situation. For example, noise-related events, which are very common in Rocinha, are not registered in the OPM. And when I see the table 2, it seems the variable was not well understood. Two first categories indicated interaction beginning after a public demand. Next three showed interactions happened due to the initiative of police officers. It means they are not types of occurrences. They show how occurrences start. Reactive reaction is by public demand, and proactive reaction starts at the initiative of street-level officers. The others are the events or occurrences that were registered in the OPM. So there is an inconsistency in the count. Human research ethics can affect the results related to non-compliance when a body-worn can policy has not yet implemented. Brazilian National Health Council published protocols about the human research ethics that should have been observed in this research. According to the guidelines, participants must be volunteer, clarified, and sign a formal consent. I believe it's nothing different than US and other countries. When a body-worn cans policy has already been implemented, officers must follow the rules because they are institutionalized. On the contrary, the research ethics guideline assures them the right to interrupt the participation in any research activity at any time. This norm suggests that non-cooperation by police officers cannot be interpreted as non-compliance with body-worn can protocols. And three comments to conclude this presentation. In my opinion, human rights theories are not the most appropriate theoretical approach to evaluate public policy, because they are too focused on right and wrong and do not have the required resources to assess important elements of public policy. In this case, theories of organization are more appropriate. And the need for additional effect sizes derived from randomized control trials is especially important in the realm of body-worn cans, because police agencies need to know their likely return on investment. While body-worn can technology itself is cheap, the storage of digital evidence is increasingly expensive. And the activation of body-worn cans is a crucial point for the success of the policy. However, it's an issue that's not as well defined as many would think. That's all. Thank you.